Imagine, if you can, a land devastated by drought. The scorching sun punishes the once fertile, now cracked soil. The fields, once lush and green, are now nothing more than a sea of dust and despair. The people of Israel, once prosperous, now struggle daily for survival. 3 long years have passed since the last drop of rain fell on this land. 3 years of relentlessly blue sky, without a single cloud on the horizon. 3 years of hunger, thirst, and growing desperation. And why has this curse fallen upon the land? Why has the sky closed, denying its mercy to God's chosen people? The answer, my friends, lies in the hearts of men. The people of Israel have turned their backs on the true God, the God of their ancestors, the God who freed them from slavery in Egypt and guided them through the desert. Instead, they've turned to false idols, to gods of wood and stone, gods that have eyes but do not see, ears but do not hear. And at the center of this apostasy stands King Ahab, ruler of Israel, and his wife, Queen Jezebel. It was they who raised altars to Baal, who promoted the worship of false gods, who persecuted the prophets of the Lord. But not all is lost, for in this dark hour one man rises, a man whose faith burns stronger than the scorching sun over the parched earth, a man whose name will echo through the centuries as a beacon of courage and devotion. His name is Elijah. Elijah the Tishbite, a rugged man of the desert, clothed in animal skins with a thick beard and eyes that seem to pierce the soul. He is not a man of smooth words or refined manners. He is a prophet of the living God, a voice crying in the wilderness, calling the people back to the path of righteousness. For 3 years Elijah has lived as a fugitive, hiding from the wrath of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. Fed by ravens sent by God, drinking from hidden brooks, he has survived while the rest of the nation withered. But now, the moment has come. It's time for Elijah to step out of the shadows and confront the evil that has infected the heart of Israel. With firm, determined steps, Elijah marches towards the royal palace. The guards, surprised by his audacity, dare not stop him. He strides through marble corridors, his dusty cloak in stark contrast to the luxury around him. Finally, he stands before King Ahab. The monarch, seated on his throne, looks with contempt at the disheveled prophet. "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" Ahab snarls. But Elijah is not intimidated. With a thunderous voice, he responds, "I have not made trouble for Israel, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals." The silence that follows is deafening. The courtiers hold their breath, expecting to see their king order the immediate execution of this insolent prophet. But Elijah isn't finished. With divine authority, he issues a challenge that will echo through the ages. "Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." The sun had barely risen when the crowds began to gather on Mount Carmel. From all parts of Israel they came, peasants and nobles, young and old, all eager to witness the confrontation between the solitary prophet of Yahweh and the numerous prophets of Baal. The air was charged with expectation. Whispers ran through the crowd as people speculated about what was about to happen. Some mocked Elijah, doubting that a single man could challenge the established power of the Baal cult. Others, however, felt a spark of hope in their hearts, remembering the ancient stories about the power of the God of their ancestors. Then he appeared. Elijah, the prophet of God, climbed to the top of a prominent rock, his solitary figure silhouetted against the morning sky. Around him, 450 prophets of Baal clustered, their ornate robes in stark contrast to Elijah's simple cloak. The prophet's voice rang out clear and strong, echoing across the mountainside. "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the wind blowing through the rocks. Elijah's words had struck at the heart of the matter. It was time to choose, time to decide who they really believed in. Then Elijah proposed a test. 2 bulls would be prepared as a sacrifice, one for Baal and one for Yahweh. But no fire would be lit by human hands. Instead, the prophets would call on their respective gods, and the God who answered by fire, consuming the sacrifice, would be acknowledged as the true God. The crowd murmured in approval. It seemed fair, a clear and incontestable test of divine power. The prophets of Baal, confident in their numbers and royal favor, readily accepted the challenge. After all, they were many, and Elijah was alone. What chance did he have? The sun climbed in the sky as the prophets of Baal began their ritual. They danced frantically around the altar, their chants increasing in volume and intensity with each passing moment. "O Baal, answer us," they shouted, their voices hoarse from crying out. Hours passed. The sun reached its zenith and still no sign from Baal. The prophets, desperate, began to cut themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until blood flowed. Elijah watched it all with a mixture of pity and disdain. When noon came, he could no longer contain himself. With a voice laden with sarcasm, he shouted, "Shout louder! Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." His words provoked nervous laughter in the crowd. Some of the prophets of Baal looked at Elijah with hatred in their eyes, but most were too busy with their frantic plea to notice. The afternoon wore on. The sun began its descent towards the horizon, and still no sign from Baal. No spark, no flame, no response to the desperate cry of his prophets. Finally, exhausted and defeated, the prophets of Baal fell silent. The failure was evident to all. The crowd, which hours before had been divided, now looked at Elijah with a mixture of curiosity and renewed hope. It was time for the prophet of the Lord. With calm determination, Elijah stepped forward. His voice, firm and confident, cut through the silence. "Come here to me." The crowd drew near, forming a circle around the prophet. With deliberate gestures, Elijah began to rebuild the old altar of the Lord that had been torn down. He chose 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel. Each stone represented not just a tribe, but a promise. The promise of a God who had not forgotten his people, even when the people had forgotten him. Around the altar, Elijah dug a deep trench. Then he arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. But Elijah wasn't satisfied. He wanted there to be no doubt about God's power. So he did something that in everyone's eyes seemed like madness. "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood," he ordered. The spectators exchanged confused looks. Water. On the sacrifice, how could it catch fire? But Elijah wasn't finished. "Do it again," he said. "And then, for the 3rd time, do it a 3rd time." Water ran down around the altar, soaking the sacrifice and the wood, overflowing and filling the trench around it. The crowd watched in silence, a mixture of expectation and skepticism on their faces. What was Elijah doing? How could he expect a fire to consume such a drenched sacrifice? But the prophet knew something they didn't. He understood that for God nothing is impossible, that the power of the Creator knows no limits. With the altar prepared, Elijah stepped back. The moment of truth had arrived. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and red. A gentle breeze blew across Mount Carmel, carrying the smell of the sea. The moment that would define the future of Israel had come. Elijah stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the sky. The crowd held its breath, the silence so deep you could hear hearts beating. Then the prophet began to pray. His voice, though no louder than a whisper, seemed to echo across the entire mountain. "O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Elijah's prayer wasn't long or elaborate. There were no flourishes in his words, no attempt to impress with eloquence. It was a simple, direct plea born of unshakable faith. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched on, heavy and oppressive. And then, suddenly the sky opened. A deafening roar filled the air as a column of fire descended from the heavens. It was as if the sun itself had decided to visit the earth. The fire struck the altar with unimaginable force. In an instant, the sacrifice was consumed. The wood disappeared in an explosion of flames. The stones of the altar melted like wax. But the fire didn't stop there. It licked up the water in the trench, vaporizing it into a cloud of steam that rose to the skies. Even the soil around the altar was scorched, leaving an indelible mark on the earth. The demonstration of God's power was so swift, so complete, so overwhelming, that for a moment no one moved, no one spoke, no one even breathed. And then, like a wave breaking on the shore, the reality of what they had witnessed hit the crowd. With a single movement, as if guided by an invisible force, they all fell face down. And from thousands of throats a cry arose, echoing across the hills and valleys. "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" The sound of their acclamation was like the roar of many waters, a cacophony of worship and recognition. Tears flowed freely as the people of Israel finally realized the truth they had neglected for so long. Elijah remained standing, his eyes turned to the sky, an expression of gratitude and humility on his sun-weathered face. He knew it wasn't he who had performed this miracle. He was merely an instrument in the hands of the Almighty. But the story doesn't end here, my friends. For with the renewal of faith came the promise of renewal for the land. Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bowing down with his face between his knees. There he began to pray again, this time for rain. 6 times he sent his servant to look towards the sea. 6 times the servant returned, reporting that there was nothing in sight but the vast blue of the Mediterranean. But on the 7th time, "I see a cloud," the servant reported, "as small as a man's hand rising from the sea." It was all Elijah needed to hear. He knew that the God who had answered with fire would now answer with water. "Go and tell Ahab," Elijah ordered his servant. "Hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." The sky, which for so long had been an unrelenting blue, began to darken. Clouds formed as if by magic, growing and spreading with supernatural speed. The wind began to blow, bringing with it the unmistakable smell of rain. And then, my friends, the heavens opened. It wasn't an ordinary rain. It was a deluge, a cascade of blessings poured out on the parched land. The water fell in torrents, washing away years of dust and hopelessness. The sound of the rain was like music to the ears of the people of Israel. Children who had never seen rain in their short lives danced in the puddles that formed rapidly. Farmers fell to their knees, their hands raised in gratitude as they felt the earth eagerly drinking in the long-awaited water. This wasn't just physical rain. It was a sign, a living testimony to God's power and mercy. It was the promise fulfilled, the restoration begun. As the rain continued to fall, a transformation began to occur, not just in the land, but in the hearts of the people of Israel. The seeds of faith, long dormant, began to sprout. The people who had wandered in the darkness of idolatry now saw a great light. The truth they had witnessed on Mount Carmel was engraved in their hearts with the force of lightning. In the days that followed, altars to Baal were torn down across the country. Groves dedicated to Asherah were cut down. The people of Israel, with renewed fervor, turned to the God of their ancestors. But the transformation wasn't just spiritual. As the rain continued to fall, the land began to awaken from its long sleep. Streams, long dry, began to flow again. Parched fields began to green. Flowers, not seen for years, burst from the soil in explosions of color. It was as if all creation was celebrating Israel's return to its Creator. My dear listeners, the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel is not just a tale from the distant past. It's a story that echoes through the centuries, speaking directly to our hearts today. Like the people of Israel, we often find ourselves divided in our loyalties. We waver between the true God and the Baals of our time, be they wealth, power, fame, or pleasure. We build altars in our hearts to idols that cannot save, that cannot quench the thirst of our souls. But the God of Elijah hasn't changed. He is still the God who answers by fire. He is still the God who sends the rain. He is still the God who transforms hearts and renews lives. Elijah's challenge still echoes today. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. And the promise remains, if we turn to him with all our hearts, if we tear down the altars of our false gods, if we cry out to him in faith, he will answer. Perhaps not with literal fire from heaven, but with the fire of his Spirit in our hearts. Perhaps not with physical rain, but with showers of spiritual blessings that will renew our parched souls. Conclusion: the true God to be followed. My friends, the lesson of Mount Carmel is clear. There is only one true God worthy of our worship and devotion. It's not a God of wood or stone, not a God created by human hands or imagined by human minds. It's the living and true God, the creator of heaven and earth, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who fully revealed himself in Jesus Christ. This is the God who loves us with an everlasting love, the God who seeks us even when we stray, the God who is always ready to forgive, to restore, to renew. He is the God who answers when we call, the God who performs miracles not just in history, but in our lives today, the God who can transform our aridity into abundance, our hopelessness into joy, our death into life. Therefore, let us make our choice today. Like the people of Israel on Mount Carmel, let us declare with our words and our lives, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." May we, like Elijah, have the courage to stand for truth, even when we stand alone. May we have the faith to believe that our God is greater than any challenge we face, and may we experience in our own lives the transforming power of the one true God. For He is the God who was and is and always will be, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, and in His name there is life, power, and eternal hope. If you've made it this far, read the Lord's name in the comments and be sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel to receive weekly doses of clarification from the Lord's Word. God bless you, and see you in the next video.